Let's wait for 1 minute. I welcome you all. Today I'm going to discuss about inflation, and this is the last topic in this course. Uh, First, I will take a definition of inflation, and I will explain to you how inflation is measured, namely using wholesale the price index. Then I'll go on to discuss about what are the types of inflation, and then I will discuss about what are the causes of inflation. And in the last part of my lecture, I will discuss about impact of inflation and what are the policies that government can adopt to contain inflation. You may recall that in the beginning of my lecture on macroeconomics, I told you that apart from the growth in GDP, one of the major objectives of any nation is to contain rise in price, which is technically called inflation. So let us take a definition of inflation, because the meaning of inflation in the realm of economics is different from what an ordinary person understands by inflation, a rise in price. For instance, a person may see a rise in price in one good or two good commodities and then can call it inflation, whereas this is not the case as far as economics is concerned. So let us take this definition, which you can see, is inflation is defined as sustained tendency, the word underlined word, of the general level of prices to rise over a period of time. Now, if you read carefully this definition, certain aspects are clear, or certain aspect emerges out of this definition, which are key to our understanding what is inflation. Number one is that inflation is not one jump, that is the one price change or price change at one point of time is not inflation. Let me explain like this. Let us say that is today the price, what is the date? Today is 15th of March, price rises by 50% today. Now there is a jump and then it stops rising. This is not inflation, number one. Second thing is that this rise in price is not, is not prevalent only in one or two commodities. Rather, there is, general tendency for the most of the prices to rise. What I mean by this, that the consumption basket of a typical consumer contains many items. If price of onion or some other edible oil only increases, we cannot describe this phenomenon as inflation. So that is why the word general level of prices. And then when we say that it is a sustained tendency and it is not one time, then this is that it is spread over a period of time. Not only this, but it may be months or lasting for few months. So this is a persistent rise in price, and this rise is spread over a period of time. Not it is one point at one point of time. So not one point of time, and this effect is we find in most of the goods and services. So this phenomena is described as inflation. Now, inflation is measured by a price index. Now, please keep in mind that in microeconomics, we study the price of car, price of a particular item, but in macroeconomics, we are not studying phenomena of one. That is why the word is general level of prices. So, inflation is measured by a price index. I will briefly explain to you how index is constructed. Uh, the example which I am taking and the actual calculation, they are very similar. Only difference here there is that the number of commodities, they are large, more than 500. Whereas this example contains three commodities which are encompassing. So let us try to understand how inflation is calculated by a price index. It is a simple arithmetic example which I am taking. Now, in order to calculate price index, what is done is that a survey is carried out. By naturally, the government has got agencies, a survey is carried out to find out how much a typical consumer. Naturally, a sample is taken. Please keep in mind, because you cannot. And sample, when you study in the second semester about methodology, then you will find that there are various methods for arriving at scientific method of sampling, which may represent the population. And this survey may ask the consumer how much they spend on various items. Let us say uh, they ask how much you spend on food, how much on shelter, how much on medical care. Just an example. Now, why this is asked is that when consumer, for example, their consumption expenditure, if they are spending more on certain items, let us say 40% here and 20% here and the rest here, sorry, 60 and let us say 30, okay. So, or let us say 60%, or make it 20-20. So, if price of food rises, then it will impact their consumption, because the proportion of amount is spent on these items is much higher. Whereas if one is spend less on certain item, even if prices have gone up, because the proportion of money is spent on that is less, therefore it will not affect the consumer much. That is why the survey asks people how much you spend on various items, and that gives us the importance in the consumption basket. And that is why the weight is assigned based on this expenditure, which the typical consumer, naturally they aggregate of the sample, they arrive at the typical Indian consumer, they spend on these items as far as. Now, in order to prepare a price index, a base year is selected. Base year acts as a benchmark against which the rise in price is measured. And base year, the criteria for selection of base year is that it should be a year of normal rise in price, not very high level or a moderate level of price. Because if you are trying to compare something for certain year, let us say, if you, for example, 2019, if you base it, just example, and this has experienced high rate, then you are comparing something with that, then it will be misleading. Therefore, a normal year is the criteria, should be a normal year, a base year. Still, a base year usually changes, over the years. So let me repeat what I said. In order to prepare price index, a survey is periodic survey is carried out to find out the importance of the item in consumer consumption basket of a typical consumer. And then a base year is selected. Base year should be of normal rise in price. And the weight are assigned to which depending upon which has been derived from the survey, how much they spend on it. and the base price in the base year is set at 100. Now let us go further and try to understand it by an example. Now let us say that the base year is selected as 2020, and it is a year for normal rising price. And the survey has pointed out that people spend typically on these three items. Naturally, please keep in mind that food item contains so many things, shelter and medical. This is for illustration purpose. The survey has pointed out that people spend 0.2, that is 20% on food, 50% on shelter, and 30% on 0.3 on medical care. So it will be 100% naturally. Now, the price in the base year is set at 100, all the prices. Okay. Now then it is multiple, that you multiply 0.2 and 0.5, 0.2, see that is consumer price index will be 100, let us say. Right. Now, let us also assume that the price in the year 2020 has gone up by 2%, from 100 to 120, and you know it how the price is percentage change is change divided by the starting point. For example, price which prevailed in 2020 and then difference here 2021 minus divided by 2020. Let us say that prices have gone up from 100 to 102%, and shelter prices have gone up to 105, and medical care 110. Now the weightages are already there, which shows the importance of these items in the consumption basket of the consumer. The more greater the weightage, the more important. So we multiply by this. So it will come out to be 105.9. It means that in comparison to 2000, the consumer price index has gone up by this much. Now, if you want to find out the rate of inflation, so simply it is this year's price index, that is 2021 minus price index of 2020 divided by the price index of the B, that is the 2000. Now here it is 105, it is given here, minus 100 and divided by 100. So it will come out to be 0.059. Actually, if you convert it to percentage, it will be that the inflation during this period is was 5.9%. So in comparison to that year, and same way, for example, if you want to find out the inflation between from the, let us say, 2021 to 2022, like that, naturally the change divided by the starting point, you can easily find out. And so this is how inflation is calculated using a price index. The example which I have taken and the actual calculation, they are very similar. There is no difference whatsoever. Only difference is that the number of goods are much larger. That is why this example is taken to capture the essence of calculation. So, and as I told you that the number of goods which are there and is much larger. And moreover, one may think that, for instance, here we have taken it that 2021, for example, if base year is spread over, let us say 2010 base year is, and you are calculating 2020. During this period, what may happen that the amount of money spent on these items, like 20%, may have changed. That is why periodically the weightages may also have to be changed, because the consumption basket of the consumer, what people consume, may also change, and the importance may also change over here. So when I talk about the typical, means the representative, that includes all this set of society that can represent it. That the sample will not be skewed for for a particular section of the society. So this is how it is calculated and arrived at the rate of inflation, and that is why the government of India also uses these index to take policy decisions, like the announcement of the dearness allowances to the employees, or conduct of monetary policy, because the target in India is that the inflation should be in the realm of for plus minus 2, that is 6%, or it should range in between. The band is this. So the government, if it then government may take steps using monetary and other policies to control this rise in price. Now, inflation actually is considered to be one of the greatest enemy, or the enemy number one for any economy. If inflation is not managed well, and then economies may be ruined, or they may have experienced devastating effect or very harmful effect. And some countries which have mismanaged rising price, they have experienced it. That is why whenever prices start rising, governments, applies various measures to contain it. Because if you leave inflation, then the rise in price is now, not very high, and if it is not controlled, it may turn out to be a higher number, and that may create a problem. But the economists have used certain terminologies related to rise in price, and in fact the economy, the description of inflation in literature is very colorful. Runaway, creeping, galloping, this and that. So many types are there. But typically, inflation can be described using these three methods. We can call it inflation as a low inflation, or we can describe inflation as a galloping, and this is the kind of inflation which we call hyperinflation. So maybe you can describe low inflation as like one has caught cold, and like if you have a disease, you can on a continuum. So it's like you catch cold, and when this hyperinflation is there, it is cancer to the economy. It is a death knell for the economy once initially. Let us try to understand what are the features of the low inflation. When economies are experiencing rise in price, naturally price will not be stagnant for that matter. One more thing, just I would like to tell you that there is a terminology of, before I quote, deflation. Deflation is the opposite of this thing. The rise in price, like in some countries have experienced, like Japanese economy. There, the wholesale price index, they have gone in negative for years, so they have got very low level. So this is the opposite of that, of inflation. So the first type of inflation is price rise low, and here prices are rising slowly and predictably. There is not much uncertainty, and it is less than 10%. Less than 10%. Any means 7%, 8%, 9%, but so the situation is not that alarming. And in this kind of situation, people trust money because it. Please also keep in mind the rise in price, inflation, and the value of money, they are inversely related. Higher the inflation, lower the value of money. So they are negative. So that is why if prices are rising, if you have got a lot of cash or other things, so it means there is erosion in the purchasing power. The purchasing power get affected because of the rising price, unless it is not compensated. I will explain to you, because there are some misconceptions also, because people think that if prices are rising, and then it's always harmful. But in certain cases, if the rise in price is also accompanied by changes in other prices, then it may not affect it. So, like here, the situation is not of concern, and single-digit inflation economy. But if this single-digit the rise in price is not controlled, and then prices start rising further, then it moves into the realm of what we call galloping inflation. The available version may be double-digit or triple-digit. And it may be 15, 16, 25, or more than triple-digit, more than 100%. And various countries have suffered on account of this thing. Usually, this results from a situation where the governance of the economies is not good, or in the wake of war, or there is some eruption of some revolution, some very not normal, the situation. So certain and but the thing is that the countries have survived also with the galloping inflation. Example are some certain countries like Latin American countries in 70s and 80s, they have experienced more than 100%. Israel has experienced more than 100%. So when the rise in price moves into the domain of the galloping inflation, that you can understand the word galloping, drive from, the the associated with the horse, you can understand it. So here the contract get indexed. Index means that, for example, the salaries are there, wages are there, then prices get indexed means that if price rise by 10%, salaries may also increase by, let us say, 1 to 1 if it is there, will also go up by. So it means indexing. Indexing simply means that the various types of contract, maybe the wages contract or other type of contract, they move in line with the rise in price. So I mean, get, because you know that if it is not, it does not move in line in consonance with the rise in price, then the one party may be at disadvantage. If let us say those who receive income, their salaries, they are not compensated, so their purchasing power may go down. So that is why it is, it gets indexed, but not every contract gets indexed like that. And in this kind of market, financial market wither away, in functioning of financial market get all, because there is so many variables which are related to rise in price, not only the interest rate, but its effect on financial market. Because one thing is that if prices are rising, let us say the inflation is 10% and the rate of interest on bank is, let us say, if you keep money, rate of interest is 8%. It means that 10 minus 8, that it means that 2% the real interest rate. After compensating for the rise in price, 2% is the real return interest rate one. If prices goes up by, let us 12% and rate of interest remains same, nominal rate, then it means that this is negative, minus 2% real interest rate. It means that the return on the fund deposited will not. So there is a whole lot, there is a link between, you can understand through monetary policy, that the rate of interest will be affected because of that, and its effect may get transmitted to financial markets and other things like that. So the functioning of financial market get also affected because of that. And what happens also that in a world of global, poor capital portfolio, if certain economies are experiencing very high, it signals that something is not managed well. So the investors may also stay away from those markets, and because of that, the functioning they may take up money from that market because they are getting certain return and more. Then it may be eroded by rise in price. Further, they have to convert their domestic currency in terms of foreign currency. Some of you may have finance and international finance, so you will study a theory which is known as Fisher effect, which tries to relate interest rate with the rise in price. And there is another theory which is called international Fisher effect, which tries to relate the interest rate with exchange rate. countries which have got high interest rate, they have depreciating currencies because the high interest rate is a result of rising high rise in price. So in this situation, what happens that when then people purchasing power is getting eroded, what they do that they try to hoard goods. They will buy it because they think that if they do not buy now, they may have to pay higher in the future, and they make investment in some which may compensate for the rise in price, like making investment in real estate and other things. And in this situation, lending, when I said that financial market wither away, because lending becomes problematic because the lender, if for example is lending now, let us say 2020 lend 2000, and he had expectation that the rise in price was 8%, therefore he was charging 10%. Now if price goes up further, then what may happen that the lender will not be compensated for the rise in price, and therefore the lending may also be affected, because that is why in recent times some countries have experienced, you know, that what when prices start rising, what happens that it's like a measuring rod. Just imagine that price is something, you know, we so some goods and services which we, so price quoted is measures that. Now we just imagine that this rod is changed every time because of the rise in price. That becomes problematic. So some countries like Latin American countries, what they said that they try to get all the contact index. You know, if prices goes up by 10%, all the wages will go up by, all other prices will go up by 10%. Interest rate will go up by 10%. So if you change everything, then no party will get affected because the rise in price is. But indexation, full indexation is next impossible, and moreover, the price index is an approximation of the rise in price. You know, actually, it may not capture fully the. So therefore, you cannot compensate. You cannot, you know, take into account the rise in price by changing every price. You know, price of loans, interest rate, wages, and other prices, price of goods, and everything will move in line with that. And the price rise by 10%, then the exchange rate may also depreciate by 10%. So it means that you are changing the measuring rod. So some countries have tried to, and moreover, in recent time there is also type of borrowing which are called floating rate. It means that the rate of interest which is charged is some, let us say 2% plus rise in price rate of inflation. If inflation is the 10%, that it will be 12%. If inflation is 8%, it will be 10%. So it will move. So that is some adjustment, you know, what we call inflation index borrowing instrument. But as I said that to fully account for rise in price is next to impossible. And as I said that it creates, when we see that impact of inflation, then we will come to back to this point in more detail. Then if prices are not, you know, not contained, and it continues to rise further and further, a time may come when the prices move into the you know, the realm of what is described as hyperinflation, the word hyper. And here prices may rise by, you know, the million and trillion times. It is not something which is a fictional thing. It has been documented in the history. You know, various countries like Germany during the war and Zimbabwe in recent times have experienced this kind of inflation. And inflation, hyperinflation is defined when rate of inflation is 50% per year. So if prices are rising by 50%, 100%, or the a month, then it may, the effect of compounding, you can understand it. If let us say rise in price is, inflation is high, and 50%, sorry, 1 plus 0.5, and so you can understand the effect of this compounding, so if, and over a long period of time, it may be 2 million fold increase over the thing. So this is some definition. When this happens, then what happens is that, the economies are doomed. The monetary system completely collapses. Nobody accepts currency of that country, and finally, when the economies are revived, then the new currency has to be printed, and like that. So various countries have been, rigged by the hyperinflation, and the most recent example is Zimbabwe, which also has a distinction of printing the highest denomination currency note in the annals of his, the monetary history. So the and as I said, that it is a cancer and death knell for the economy when it happens, the So the and there are various stories about hyperinflation, like in Germany, the war time. What happened that people, when prices are rising, experiencing hyperinflation, then what happened that, that if you go to, for example, one shop and then move to another shop and come back to find out the price of the same product from this previous shop, you will find that the prices may have gone up. So the Germany, the saying was that there was a time when we go in the market with the goods in our pockets and come back with the goods in basket. Now we go money in basket and come back with the goods in pocket. An entire time saving could not fetch achieving them, So, and that is why, that when this happens, then people can exchange the commodity, it becomes barter, because people do not trust currency notes and other things. So maybe a cigarette may be used, maybe some other thing. Maybe people like me who, because in the war time when people are dying, nobody would like to listen to lectures even. So means what I am trying to explain to you, that the barter, something may be exchanged, for another thing like that. So as I said, that it is the severe, the most deadly, and type of, when this happens, then economies, they they are just, the just it's death for the economies, and the economies have to be, the hit refresh, the type thing, the all the currencies have to be changed and like that. Recent time, Bolivia has also experienced this kind of inflation. The some, but not to the extent of Zimbabwe and other, and Germany and other countries. So that is why the the severity of inflation may affect the policy making and the impact also, because if some countries are has experienced hyperinflation, then its effect will be severe. It will be drastic, it will be long lasting. And whereas if it is moderate type, people may feel the effect, but that will not be that much. Now the next question is, what are the causes of inflation? If you have any question, you can ask before I proceed.
Yes, sir. So I have a question. So we discussed three types of inflation. So I got the first one. So what are the reasons that hyperinflation can occur in a country?
You know that situations like these, naturally, when for example, maybe war, like in Germany, what happened, because of the Second World War, didn't it? And governance, for example, Zimbabwe, it was complete mismanagement of the economy. Or sometime, upheaval or revolution takes place. So normally, this kind of situation is the result of, any of these reasons, and the experience like Germany and Zimbabwe, I told, like governance is very important. There was no war as such in Zimbabwe, but the economy was completely mismanaged by Mugabe and others, and that is why we moved. So normally it happens situation like this, either the persistent over the mismanagement of the economy in recent, or maybe the result of long drawn war, because of that. So, like Latin American economies, which have experienced not exactly to the hyperinflation of million and trillion times, but very, very severe problem, was the result of again the mismanagement. They have borrowed too much and like that, the government finances and other things. If you are spending too much, and government's receipt are less, that also a stroke inflation because it's printing too much money in the economy. Sometimes that government can borrow it, but the government cannot, the borrowing cannot fulfill, then government can print currency. you know so when hyperinflation is there, the government may print too much money sometimes, mismanagement, or it may be, normally it is a result of some not abnormal happening, not normal happening. But no two inflation is the characteristics but these are some broad characteristics of inflation which we find it. But when hyperinflation is there, then the currency of that country, nobody will accept that, because, and that is why the situation arises. I'll take up the example, a recent example, even in Turkey, the prices are rising by 50-60%. So people undertake the same thing. They hoard goods and they make and like that. So hyperinflation is a swan song for the economy. That government will have to you know start afresh and issue the new currency notes. And like Zimbabwe, what they did, that in order to manage it, they tried to take their currency with the dollar, and they rationed it, and that people. So all the measures are taken to contain it. But that once you have either spent too much, the excessive spending and the dissipation of the resources and mismanagement of the resources, then economy moves into this type of inflation.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Now the next question is, what are the causes of inflation? That naturally you understand it that the I will just slightly change it. Price index, and here like GDP or total output. That the price of anything is determined by forces of demand and supply, isn't it? At the macroeconomic level, the prices of also the general level, the prices are determined by the total demand in the economy and total supply. Total demand in the economy is made up from the consumption spending, that is what the consumer spend on durable, and the investment spending by businesses, what they spend on machineries, equipment, and other things, and what the government spend on various goods, and what foreigners spend on our goods, that is export, and what we spend on our foreigners, that is import. So total demand in the economy. And the supply, total supply, that is why the word here I have written here. Normally, we would take few lectures on the basics of macroeconomics, but because of shortage of time, we are not. Otherwise, these framework normally I would take up before moving into the realm of the macroeconomic aggregate supply. So that is means that supply of total supply in the economy, irrespective of the supply of cars and other things. Total demand, when we say that, it is, as I said that, so it may be the result of either increase in demand given the supply in the economy, or it may also stem from the supply side. Whenever I talk about supply, simply means that the various factors which go into supply. Same thing like macroeconomics also, the cost of production, input costs, maybe another component, other may be important. Whatever factor they go into the affect the supply with microeconomics, that may also affect to that level because the some raw material may cost may have increased. Maybe like a recent time which we are experiencing, maybe the energy costs and other costs. So that is why the it may be the result of either excess demand in the economy or it may result from the shortage of supply, and that may affect the what we call it rise in price. For instance, the total demand in the economy, if it is, then government may have to contain this rise in price. So government may cut down its expenditure, uh, or may increase taxes, or use a tight monetary policy to this. The if excess demand in the economy is there, then it is easy to manage it. But if the problem is coming from supply side, then it is very difficult to manage. And because of that, what happens that the the in the past the price of raw material may increase. For example, because of the Ukraine war and other war, the price of wheat, and this is going to affect the bread, especially in Middle East and other countries, because the Ukraine and Russia are the major exporter of wheat. So you find it there. So naturally, so similarly, what happens is that other raw material which are used, like metals and other whatever it is used, that they go into that because of they may increase it, and because of that, the price of certain product may increase because if the cost increases, the producer may add it to it. When they add it, the price of any product may increase. And when prices increase, then the workers have to be compensated because they may demand also, or they may have to be compensated for the rising price. So a cycle may be created. The because of this thing. The rise in price may be caused from what happened that the most of the inflation in the past till 1970s was from the excess demand. But in 1970s, when in the wake of Arab-Israel war, the Arab countries imposed oil embargo on the uh, then the world witnessed a kind of inflation which it has not witnessed. It's all oil price shock. You know that the oil is a very important thing, not only for transportation, but if it is a transportation cost and other cost increases, then it has got a cascading effect in the economy. There is a ripple effect throughout that. So all those factors which affect the supply may affect it because of that, and that is why the one has to find out the cause. And sometimes it may be that it is very difficult to identify what are the causes of inflation. And unless one identifies what is the cause, then it may be difficult to contain it. I will continue in my next lecture tomorrow and will elaborate further upon why it may be difficult to identify and what role expectations play also in rising price.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.